Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. My name is Jesse and I am an employment and retention specialist. And today we are going to talk about one of the most important pieces in job search strategy. This is something that is not very widely taught and desperately needed. And it's one of the reasons that many people flounder at their job search. So with that in mind, we're going to go over three sections today. We're going to talk a little bit about knowing the employer, finding employers, and how do employers find people. And just a quick bit of housekeeping here. You can use the navigator links in the description below if you want to steer to a particular section of interest. So I want to start off with a quote. And this is by Sun Tzu. And basically what he's saying here is, if you know your enemy and you know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. Now, I'm not saying that employers are enemies or anything like that, so don't go there. But what is being said here is that knowledge is the key to success. So the more you know the employer and know yourself, the better you are going to be in developing a really good job search strategy. And that's kind of the thrust of today's workshop, is we're going to talk a little bit about knowing employers and how they go about finding talent. So with that, we need to understand, why do employers hire in the first place? And they do this because they need to get a job done, plain and simple. They also do this to engage customers, save time and money, make more money, or in some cases, even keep up their image. But generally speaking, employers are hiring because there's a need. They need someone. Now, when we talk about work, any job that an employer hires for can fit in one of three categories. There's operations management, which is also referred to as the company's core business. There is sales and marketing, financial, and support, also known as those who make it, sell it, and support it. Now, in broad strokes, every job can be broken down into one or multiple of these three categories, and they are not equally distributed. So in most companies, about 70% of the hires are in operations management, 20 in sales and marketing, and 10 in financial and support. Now, why is this important? It's because depending on where your job fits in that particular company, they will be hiring more or less of your role. So the implications for job search is that you want to start off by creating a list of companies that hire the role that you're looking to apply for. And then from there, you want to get an understanding, is this part of their core business? Meaning they're likely to hire that particular role more often. Or is this something that's not part of their core business and is more of one of those commercial functions like sales or support, in which case there will be fewer roles, right? So we want to just bear that in mind. Some other examples of this might be things like accounting, right? So an accounting firm, it fits under operations management. In say a nonprofit, depending on what it is, it might fall under support, right? So it all depends. If it's a bank, it could fall under either sales or operations, depending on where it is, or all three, so it all depends on the type of company and the functionality in which they're hiring for. So with that, let's move to the next section. Let's talk about finding employers. So there's this old adage, location, location, location. And a really good quote that someone said to me was, your job goal is the destination. Your local employer list is the map. Without the map, you're just wandering. So if you're not sure what are your local employers are, you're probably doing something like just going to the job board, clicking on the job title, and you're just seeing what comes up. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like, that works. You find stuff, right? But it's not strategic, right? You're not setting up your chances for success. You're fishing, essentially. And you can either fish with a fishing rod, which is kind of like going to the job board is, or you can fish with a net and set it up where the fish are, right? So there's different ways of going about it. It's not that fishing with the rod doesn't work. It just takes a lot more time. Now, one of my favorite tools for looking for local employers is Google Maps. And the reason that I like this tool is for the same reason that you can go to Google Maps and go find restaurants near me and or maybe find a certain retailer near me. You can do the same thing with employers, and it will give you a list of local employers that fit the type of job that you're looking for. And then what you can do with that list is you can cross-reference with job boards and try to find out where they post their jobs. Or if you're like me who lives in Scarborough and could potentially go down to Union, you can also put a postal code in downtown Toronto and see what employers exist near there as well. Some other really good tools for finding companies and employers are things like directories. So there's all kinds of them. There's industry directories, business directories, Chamber of Commerce's BIAs, which are business improvement areas. There's also trade groups. You can look up companies on LinkedIn. There's government business registrations. And yes, you can also use job boards as well. So there's many, many different ways to find all kinds of employers using directories as well. And this works really well if you have an idea of the type of work that you want to do. You can always try to find a business association, or if you know that you want to work in a particular area and there's a business improvement area in the area. That sounds awkward, but you get the point. You can always look these things up. So now let's shift our focus to talking about how employers find people. So this is about being at the right place at the right time. A friend of mine said, employers travel multiple routes to find people. Your job is to position yourself along one of those routes. And because hiring happens at specific moments, timing matters. Be on the route when they pass by, right? So this is the idea of just figuring out where do employers go and post jobs and setting yourself up to be found by them at the right time. Now, there are two types of job markets. One is called the visible job market. The other is called the hidden job market. The visible job market is ads by the company for the company. The hidden job market is ads by third parties. So if you can think of an iceberg analogy, the visible job market would be the company, it would be hiring managers, it would be recruiters that work for them, human resources, and so forth. If we're looking at the hidden job market, we're looking at staffing firms, trade unions, internship programs, as well, associations, employment service providers, internal staff, training programs, and co-op departments. Now, there is a lot of myths out, especially about the hidden job market. So some of the things that people might say about the hidden job market is that employers do this to save money. I can tell you for a fact that staffing firms are costing the employer 30% of labor. There is no way they are saving money by using a staffing firm. Sometimes you might hear things like you're missing out on opportunities or the roles are hidden. There's no job ads, and that it's 80 to 85% of jobs. There is a lot of problems with these claims. First and foremost, it undermines the whole reason why employers hire to begin with. That's number one. Number two, the statistics that are being quoted are misquotes from a study from the 1960s. Now, if you're interested in learning more about that, I actually have an entire video that goes into depth on that. So you can go and check my source material to see that I actually have done the research on this. And that's actually where it comes from. So this raises the question, what is actually hidden? Well, anytime that an employer or recruiter starts to look for people, they'll do a few things. They'll first activate their visible job market, right? So they'll take a look and see what they have. So they'll put up a posting on their career site or social media. They'll post on an external job board, what have you. But then they'll start to engage the hidden job market as well. And they might go to, employment service providers or school and co-op departments or a trade association or union. And each of those have their own internal job board for people who are receiving those services. You want to know what Epilepsy Toronto is hiring for in the employment department? You have to be a member of the employment department to find it, right? Same thing for school co-op departments. You have to either be a student or a graduate for you to access those resources, right? Same thing with trade associations and unions. You have to join them to know what's going on. The other thing that they might do is they might tell their staff, and their staff might do things like post on social media or tell people that they know of interest, right? So this is hidden to people who are not connections of the internal staff member, right? And then they might go to a recruiter, and in which case they might also post on external job boards and social media. And oftentimes what they'll do is they'll hide the name of the employer, right? They want the money that goes along with selling labor. So that kind of gives you a little bit of the idea of the different players, as well as the different strategies that are deployed within the hidden job market. One thing I will say just before moving on about specifically staffing agencies, temp agencies, and employment service providers, because there is a distinction between them. So the employment service provider is a government-funded agency, which can only have one, and they provide supports to help people get into jobs. A staffing firm, in contrast, is marketing labor for the employer, and they are paid by the employer. They are not the same thing. They are two completely different things. Now, a staffing agency may help out with the presentation of a candidate, but that is not their primary function. Their primary function is to find labor. Now let's talk about some stats around the hidden job market. So this is a business survey done in 2021 by CERIC of Canadian businesses. And there's a few things that I want you to see here. So they asked all these employers, over 500 of them, where do they go and find labor from? That is not including job boards. So when they asked this question, number of employers said 67% of them said employee referrals. And I actually think that that's more of a formal process, because I can tell you most employers will tell their staff that they're looking for people. So they'll engage their internal networks to try and locate new staff. But I just want you to just take a look at the statistics here. So 36% say they use an employment service provider, 30% say a co-op or internship, 24% of them have used staffing firms. Now, in particular, I just want you to notice that if you were to add up all of these statistics, it's over 100%. So no employer relies entirely on any one channel for hiring candidates. So that's an important thing to note, that when you are casting your net, it's a good idea to cast your net in both the visible job market. You want to be on things like job boards and such, but you also want to engage with different channels so that you can increase your opportunities of coming across that job that the employer is looking to get filled. Next, let's talk a little bit about HRIS Systems, which stands for Human Resources Information Systems. Now, most people are aware of these, but they don't really know the proper name of them. So you might think of HR Boom, for example, or Workday. These are examples of HRIS systems, and they are meant to integrate the different functions of human resources into one system. So that usually starts when people apply online. So when people say that the hidden job market, has no ads, that's not true, because this is how people get into the system in the first place. From applying online, that goes through an applicant tracking system. From the applicant tracking system, they go into the onboarding management system. From the onboarding management system, they go into the payroll and scheduling part of the system. And then from there, they do things like training, management, and then there is a process for offboarding, also referred to as outplacement, which is basically a technical, polite way of saying someone leaving the organization. But all of this is managed from front to back through a single system called an HRIS, and applying online is the gateway to that system. So now that we've talked a lot about the hidden job market and the different parties involved that you can connect with and access those channels, let's talk a little bit about the visible job market. So again, this is defined as ads by the company for the company, and they have a multitude of hiring channels. So anything from job boards, job portals, career pages, they can use their social media, media ads, sometimes Google ads, job fairs, and hiring events. Now, there are three kinds of job boards, and this is important to know because depending on the employer's strategy, they may post in different places. So if you understand the types of job boards, you can actually place yourself in a situation to find more opportunities. So the first category of job board is one that everyone knows fairly well. It's called an aggregate job board. Now, this is your Indeeds, your job banks, your hiring cafes, your Glassdoors, your ZipRecruiters, etc. Monster, and Workopolis. So these are job boards that scrape jobs from other places so that they can be the one-stop shop. And what I really like about these job boards is they are great for research. You can find all kinds of employers on these job boards. But there is some caveats about using them. So first things first, you want to understand that the amount of people applying for jobs on these boards is significantly high. There is also a lot of low quality applications. I remember being a recruiter, and within the first 30 minutes of posting on Indeed, I would get a pile of resumes. Now, these pile of resumes were absolutely terrible. And I can tell you why. It's because there are certain people that sit on there and they click apply, 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 and they don't actually read the job posting. So I would get a bunch of resumes. Not a single one of them was geared to what we were looking for. So just be aware that if you are going to use these types of job boards, you want to put through a very high quality application. The next type of job board is called a specialized job board. You might also refer to it as an industry-specific job board. Now, these are boards that are geared to a particular type of work. For example, Charity Village is geared towards nonprofit. Careers and Gears is geared to trucking. Childcare Advantage, childcare, working in culture, all things culture and hospitality. The important thing to note about this type of job board is that it will have lower volumes of applications. But this is where a lot more of the seasoned job seekers are. These are people who have become familiar with these types of boards because they're industry specific, and because of that, their applications are generally higher. So you want to make sure that when you are using these job boards, you really are putting out a good quality application. And then the third type of job board is called a diversity job board. So this is where employers are looking to find a very particular type of candidate. So they're looking to hire from diverse groups. Now, I work in the area of disability, so all my examples are going to be more disability related, but there are other types of job boards out there. So organizations like Discoverability Network, Jobsability Canada, Lime Connect, Magnet, and Career Edge all have diversity options. And employers that are specifically looking to hire from those groups will frequent this type of job board. Now, in terms of the types of applicants, yes, there's lower volumes of applications going through because people who are using these job boards in this particular case would be basically saying, I have a disability. But again, the type of application is probably going to be higher quality because the people who know about these job boards are probably linked with a disability service provider who knows what they're doing. So again, they've been prepped and prepared. So you want to make sure that if you are going to use these job boards, that you do put the time in putting out a really good quality application. I think if there's anything that I've said here, is it doesn't matter which job board you're using, you want to put forth a good quality application. So now that you know the types of job boards and their usages, I want to talk a little bit about the biggest issue with job boards, and that is stale jobs. So I went on to one of the aggregate job boards and I just typed nurses in Toronto and it came back with 81 results. And I'm like, wow, great. That's 81 possible job opportunities. But then I decided to put on another filter for 30 days. And that number suddenly dropped to 64. That means there are 17 jobs that were on this list that are over a month old. And if we're talking about aggregate job boards, which here we are, that means that they were scraped, and they might not necessarily have been scraped the day they came out. So we could be looking at jobs that are maybe 2 months out of date, from their original posting. So when we're talking about applying for roles, this is a real big issue. So when I narrowed this down to just 48 hours, we had 4 jobs. So as you can see, if you start going through there and you start meandering through job boards and just applying for whatever comes up, you can waste an incredibly large amount of time applying for jobs that are almost or already filled. And there's no incentive for employers to keep things updated. They don't systematically go through processes. As soon as they get enough candidates for a top 10, they start interviewing. Most companies, particularly small businesses, will do that. They just want the role filled. Larger companies might go to the end of the period. Governments will go to the end of the period most times, but it also depends on how urgent the hiring is. So the important piece for you to take away from this is that the faster you apply, the better. So almost on every single job board, you can actually use some sort of filter function. So you can generally sort jobs by either relevancy or by dates. What I would say is that you want to take a look at buttons that say, date posted or sort by date. And then I find the sweet spot is about 3 days, particularly if you're rotating through certain job boards. I guess you could check them every day, but generally, I would say no more than 3 days back. Now, another thing that you can do is you can use LinkedIn hashtags to find jobs. So there are some general ones that are used all the time, like hiring, employment opportunities, recruiting, job posting, etc. You can also use very specific ones, such as social work jobs, engineering careers, remote jobs. So that's a popular one as well. And when you go on LinkedIn, what you want to do is go to the top under search and type hashtag hiring. And then, of course, you want to apply the same thing that we just spoke about in terms of stale jobs. So you want to go and write maybe jobs from the last week. I wouldn't go back any further than that. And then you can go over and sort by first connections. This way, you know that whoever has put it up is actually a direct connection of yours. So that's where your searching with hashtags can actually intersect well with how you use LinkedIn. And then you can also see which connections you have are at that company. So say that you see a job posting and you take a look and you're connected with one of the recruiters there. You can then send them a message and say, hey, I'm applying for this particular role. So I'm going to start to wrap up, but I'm going to do a bit of a case study first. So let's say you're interested in a particular company and you can't find any of the job postings. And this happened for one of my candidates. They had picked a cookie factory in Scarborough, but they couldn't find any job postings for it. So what could you do next? Well, there's a bunch of things that you could do. The first is you could use LinkedIn to see if there's any mutual connections that you have, or you can actually message connections that you may have to network into the right connection. So that's one thing that you could do. Another thing that you could do is try cold calling the company to find out where they post their jobs. In this case, that is exactly what I did with this particular candidate. And then another option is you could go and if there's a physical space for it, you can leave a resume at the entrance or mail slot or what have you. So when we called the company, what we found out is that they used a staffing firm. Now, the job posting they would have had to have applied for would have looked something like this. I'm not going to disclose the name of the staffing firm, but it was a very general posting for general laborers. Now, if you hadn't talked to the company, you would never have known to apply for this this posting to get into that job. So this is where cold calling can be an advantage, and you don't need to sell yourself over the phone as much as you're just looking for information on how to fit into the process. So that is a little bit of advice on how to use cold calling to your advantage. You don't need to do the selling, but if you use it as a way to find information, most people are reasonably helpful in giving you some information on where to look. So today's workshop's big takeaways. The first is from the section Getting to Know Your Employer. And we talked all about how different employers will hire more or less roles depending on where it is within the organization and the type of organization and their core business. So the takeaway from that is you want to get a sense of which employers are going to be hiring your roles more often. So from that, you want to create some kind of list to make sure that you are following those particular types of employers. Then you also want to locate those types of employers, and I recommend doing that geographically. Google Maps is my go-to tool for this, and you can then, after you know which employers you're going to be able to get to on a regular basis for work, you can then cross-reference with job boards and use company directories for local areas to bolster that list. And then you start monitoring them on job boards and what have you. Next, we talked a little bit about how employers find people, and we talked about the two different types of job markets, and we dispelled some myths about those. But we also talked about what's hidden into who and how those markets operate. We then talked a little bit about using job boards strategically and using filters to ensure that you eliminate stale jobs. We also talked about hashtags and how to find jobs within your LinkedIn network. And then we also talked about using cold calling to, as part of a case study, to solve knowledge gaps instead of making sales. So I hope that this has been a very useful workshop for you and that it's given you some pretty good background. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to like and subscribe and send this to someone who you think needs it. And we will catch you next time.